Okay, well, thank you all for joining us on this, if you're in Chicago, rather cold and miserable afternoon. My name is Christine Scher, pronouns are she, her, and I am the Senior Instructional Learning and Accessibility Specialist in the Office of Distance Learning in the School of Professional Studies. My business cards are about a foot long. And in my role, I work with my colleagues and faculty developers who are building online courses. And my main responsibility is to ensure that our online courses are meeting the appropriate standards for digital accessibility and implementing UDL principles. So today, during my part of the presentation, I'm going to be walking you through some of the key things that you can do in Canvas to make sure that content you put into Canvas is accessible. And then Jim, you want to?
And my name's Jim Stahoviak. My business cards rival Christine's in length as I'm the Accessible Technology Strategy and Operations Lead, and that's a split role out of Northwestern IT. So I work with the Teaching and Learning Technologies team there on accessibility initiatives, as well as Accessible NU, where I work with assistive technology and making sure things are accessible for our students as well. And I'll show you some tools that everyone at Northwestern has access to for taking in your course sites in various formats once they've been made accessible.
Yeah. So to start off, I want to just kind of talk very briefly about, what do we mean by digital accessibility? What, do we mean by assistive technology? To give a little context for why you're doing all of this. So digital accessibility basically refers to, can digital content be accessed by disabled users, in our case, generally disabled students? And accessible, like in a very broad sense, can refer to like, does the student have an internet connection? Is this affordable? But usually when you're talking about digital accessibility, it's very specifically referring to being accessible for people with disabilities. And there's a lot of stuff that kind of goes into that. The main thing is, can the digital item, a website, a piece of software, interact with assistive technology? And assistive technology is basically a big category that encompasses a lot of different pieces of software and hardware that allow disabled users to interact with computers. One of the most common ones is a screen reader. Screen readers are software that will read the content of a web page or document or whatever is on your screen out loud to a user. But it's more robust than like a text-to-speech tool because it also provides a lot of navigation information. It has keyboard shortcuts built into the program so that users can very quickly move through a page. There's some really cool videos like on YouTube of expert screen reader users demonstrating how they navigate with them. And like, they're listening to stuff at like 300 words per minute and are navigating really quickly and skillfully. It's very cool. But they only work like well if the website or document is formatted correctly. And we're going to talk about what formatted correctly looks like. Some other things that kind of fall under the header of assistive technology are things like keyboard navigation. Can you interact with the website or software entirely using a keyboard? Somebody who is blind and can't see a cursor on a screen isn't going to be able to interact with something that requires a mouse. Some people may have physical disabilities that make it so that they can't use a mouse, perhaps paralysis, types of arthritis, other things that make holding and moving a mouse difficult or impossible. For a lot of folks, using a keyboard and keyboard shortcuts is much easier. Canvas, fortunately, is able to be navigated by keyboards by default, so you don't really have to worry about, if you're just using Canvas, it'll be, keyboard accessible. But it's something to kind of, keep an eye out for if you are using other plugins or learning apps. There's some other assistive technologies that are a little less common. Some folks will use like head wands that are kind of basically a headband where they can move their head to control the screen. Foot pedals are another one. There's a lot of really cool pieces of assistive technology, but fortunately, they all kind of feed into the same framework. So if something works for a screen reader, it's probably going to work for pretty much everything else. So that's kind of our context. So give me a second and I will share my screen and I'm going to demonstrate. Here it is. I have too many windows open. Okay. So you can see I've got this page in Canvas that I spent a really long time developing the content for. And I'm going to walk you through what to look for in terms of making this page accessible. So we'll go into edit mode and bring up the rich text editor. So the first thing I want to point out is this little icon down here at the bottom, the little circle with a person, a human figure standing in it. This is the built-in accessibility checker in Canvas. It is a useful tool, but it should not be the last thing. Like if it's like right now, this is coming up with no errors. There's no problems here according to it. That's not accurate. There's a lot of issues on this page. I built this to have a lot of issues. So this is a useful tool, but you also should know what the accessibility requirements are so that, you know, if this is not catching things, you can. So the first thing I want to talk about on here is headings. Headings are important to for a few different reasons. One, if somebody's using a screen reader, they can jump from heading to heading to kind of very quickly skim through a page. And two, for students who may have any kind of focus or attention disorders. Oh, now it's loaded up some errors. Okay, that was weird. I don't know why it took that long. Now it's flagging some of my errors. So this is what it'll look like if you have some accessibility issues on your page. There'll be a little circle with a number in it. Anyway, so for headings, they're important for screen reader users because screen readers can just very quickly jump between headings to find the information that somebody needs. And for students who have attention or focus disorders, headings can be good sort of navigation points. If somebody's reading through your page and their attention wanders and they come back, it's a lot easier to find their place again if they can land on a familiar heading rather than just kind of a big block of text. Now, the way this page is laid out, there aren't actually any real headings on here. I've got this text that's bolded. I could make it bigger and underlined to have it visually stand out, but it's not actually a heading. And you can tell that because if I highlight this, in this drop-down menu here, it says paragraph. Paragraph is kind of just your normal standard text. If you're at all familiar with HTML, this is your p tags. So what we actually want to do is highlight what we want to have as the intro and click here. And you'll see that we've got 3 options for headings, 2, 3, and 4. Now we start with 2 because the page title up here is heading level 1. So the first heading that you use on a page should be heading 2. The way that it's helpful to think about headings is it should be like a bulleted outline. If you were to lift your headings out of your page, it should look like an outline with the different, heading levels representing different levels of indentation. So this is, heading level 1 would be furthest over, heading level 2 is one more in, and then this is a heading that falls underneath the intro. So this would be heading 3. This one here, this important heading, is the same kind of weight as the intro. So that becomes heading 2. This one will make heading 3. And then this one down here becomes heading 4. And you can see how they change in appearance. So again, very important to make sure that you're using those headings throughout your pages. Next, we've got this list here. And if I want to, format it as a list, sometimes people will go and just manually type asterisks like this, or, manually type in a number. That's not a 1. So, but this does not actually get read as a list. Again, screen readers, if things are appropriately styled as a list, it will get read out loud in a way that gives a user more information about it. So what that looks like is, if we highlight these items, we want this to be a list. We go over into our menu, and there's this list button here. And if you click the arrow next to it, you can see we get several options for what those bullets end up looking like. You've got a few different options for just bullets, and then different levels of numbering and letters. So let's just do a regular bulleted list. You can see it formats it, it indents it a little, and a screen reader will now recognize that these 3 items are connected in a list. So what a user would hear if they're using a screen reader is list with 3 items, red, yellow, and blue. Then they'll know that those 3 items are connected. Whereas before, if I just typed, with asterisks, they would hear asterisk red, asterisk yellow, asterisk blue, which isn't as informative. So that's how we want that to be formatted. Next, we've got a table. And this is one of the things that I know is being flagged in the accessibility checker. So the 2 things it wants me to do are include a caption and a header row. So you can correct these things just in the accessibility checker here, which is great. I'm going to show you how to set these things up just in the rich text editor so that when you're making a table, you can just do that to start with. One thing I will also say about tables is do not use them for page layouts. Sometimes, if you want to have like an image and then text next to it, you can just create, go to insert a table, just do a 2x1 and just use that. We really don't recommend doing that because, again, screen readers will read tables as containing data. They assume that that's what they're being used for. And so if you use a table for layout, it's going to get really confused. The project that Jim mentioned at the beginning, Mission Accessible, is going to include access to some accessible Canvas template pages, which will include some things that will allow you to do different kinds of layouts that don't rely on tables. So we've got this data table here. And the first thing I need to do is indicate my header rows and columns. And basically what that means is, what is kind of labeling things. So this first row here, this is a header row. Everything underneath this is red. So in order to indicate that, we highlight the row, go to Table, Cell, Cell Properties, and then you've got a whole bunch of options, but the only things you need to worry about are cell type and scope. For cell type, you only have 2 options. It's either a cell or a header cell, and in this case, we want to make them a header cell. And scope refers to basically what does this header cell cover? Is it a row, is it a column, or is it grouped? In this case, it's just a column. This one cell, controls everything underneath it in a column. If you had, say, a merged cell that covered like 2 or 3 columns, you would pick column group. But in this case, it's a very simple table. It's just a column. Then we hit save, and you can see that the formatting's changed. It's centered and it's bolded. And now let's go over here. These are also header cells. So we're going to do that same thing. Table, cell properties. And in this case, the scope is the rows it's going across. And they've changed as well. So now, if a screen reader user is listening to this, they'll go through and hear, header cell, red, yellow, blue, green, header cell, fruits, vegetables. Red fruits, 2. Yellow fruits, 3. Whereas before, they would have just heard red, yellow, blue, green, fruits, 2, 3, 1, 2. Having this header formatting makes it so that people get the appropriate information to understand what the data refers to. Now, the other thing, and you'll see down here, now that I've added those header rows, one of my accessibility errors has gone away. The other thing it wants us to do is add a caption. So we'll do that as well. We'll go back to our table menu, and this time we're going to go to table properties. And then again, we've got a few different options, but the only one we really need to look at is this here, this show caption button. So we're going to click that and hit save. Now, I don't really love how Canvas does this because it's not the most obvious change. But you can kind of see that the space around the table where it's highlighted here, it's a little bigger. There's a gap up at the top. This gap is where you can put your caption. So we'll just say colors of fruits and vegetables. And now my errors have dropped down to just one. There are more errors than just one left on here, but this is kind of, this is a good, highly accessible table. We've got a caption, we've got our header cells. Anybody interacting with this is going to be able to easily understand the data. So now we've got this link. I want people to learn about the accessible purchasing process. If you're buying software for a department at Northwestern, this is the process that you need to go through. And in an online course, it's really easy to just grab a URL and paste it into a course site. However, again, one, it doesn't look great just visually having this huge long URL. And two, if we think about a screen reader is going to read this whole thing out loud. So somebody using a screen reader is going to hear https://www.northwestern.edu/accessibility/digital accessibility/accessible purchasing process, the whole thing. And this is a short URL compared to some of the really long ones with just a whole bunch of random strings of numbers and letters. Nobody wants to listen to that. So what you need to do if you're embedding a link is to embed it in unique and descriptive text. So what does that mean? The unique part means that the text needs to be different from text that any other link is embedded in. So that means that you shouldn't do things like, click here to read about accessible purchasing. I don't want to put my link in click here, because if you have other, one, that doesn't really say anything, right? Click here doesn't really tell me anything about where you're going, right? What's the website? And a lot of times on websites, you'll have many, many links. And so if they all are embedded in click here or read more, again, screen reader users can very quickly skim through a page, jumping from link to link. So if someone's doing that, they'll just hear link, read more, link, read more, link, read more. That doesn't tell you anything. So what we actually want to do is something like this. Learn about the accessible purchasing Northwestern. Okay, so then we're going to take this big URL and I'm going to cut it. And then I want accessible purchasing process to be my link. So I'm going to highlight the text and then go up here to my link button. And then I've got two options. This is an external link. If it's something that you're linking from within the course, you can click this and it'll bring up a big panel of everything you've created in the course, and you can just add a link that way. But this is an external link. So we're going to click this, and then we're going to paste our link here and say done. And then we've got this. Now, I will add a caveat. This is a university. A lot of times citation styles are very important. And by default, a lot of style guides include, they require you to have the full URL in the citation. The way that I tend to approach that is that if you are citing your sources for thoroughness, it is okay to just embed the link in the title of the work, and you do not need to put in the full URL. If you are using your citations, though, because you are teaching students how to do appropriate, APA or MLA or Chicago style citations, and you want to model the appropriate way of doing it, you can put in the full URL. It's not going to be the best experience for some assistive technology users, but it's also something that they'll need to get used to, because that's how, if they're listening through a full bibliography of a paper, that's what it's going to be like. So that's kind of my note on links and citations. If you don't need students to like look to your citations as the perfect model of being exactly on style, just embed the link in the title. But it is okay to include the URLs if you are modeling the exact style guide that you want. So last thing that I have on here is a picture. These are some tomatoes that I grew last summer. They were the first ones I picked, and I was very proud of them, so I took a picture. And this, I know, is our last error that the accessibility checker is flagging. Image file names should not be used as the alt attribute describing the image content. This is not the most descriptive of error messages. So let's get into what this actually means. Whenever you put in an image, you can click on the image and then click this image options button, and it brings up this panel. So the first thing up at the top is this alt text field. And it's got this little hover thing. It explains what is alt text. And basically, as it says, it's used by screen readers to describe the content of an image, which is true, but alt text is surprisingly complex, because what do I need to say about this image? What is important? What can I leave out? What is definitely wrong is this file name. Tomato.jpg doesn't tell anybody anything about this picture. So let's say hand holding 3 small tomatoes. That's pretty good. I think that gets across the important piece of the picture. Depending on the context, you might need to add more information, right? Is it relevant that this is a photograph? Probably not right now, but maybe if everything else on the page had been like paintings, you might want to say that this is a photograph. You might need to specify that, my skin color, that I'm white. You might need to talk about some of the clutter on the counter behind me. It depends on the context in which you're placing the image. So, when you are putting an image into a course, think about what information is this conveying, what information is provided around it, and what do students need to know? That's kind of the core with alt text. Now, sometimes you're going to have images that don't convey any information. They're just decorative. Maybe you've got like, a graphic that's just like a line break to add some visual interest to the page, but it's really not conveying any information. In that case, you can click this box that says decorative image. And what that will do is it'll tell a screen reader to just skip that, because it doesn't have any information. So if I click that, you can see it grays this out. So I can't edit this anymore. I would generally advise, if you're not sure if something is a decorative image or not, add alt text. It's better to provide more information than less. So I'm going to say done. And now all of my accessibility errors have been cleared. Complex images, which is kind of the category of things like graphs and charts and maps, diagrams, flow charts, anything where it's a lot of data and information packed into an image, those can be really, really tough to figure out how to write good alt text for. And especially if interpreting those graphs is part of, a quiz question, that also makes it quite difficult. So the general advice that I give for complex images is to a similar approach. What is the context? How much information do students need? Sometimes if students just need to understand kind of overall trends, you can just say, a graph showing trends in traffic for the last 50 years. Passenger car traffic has declined, commercial traffic has increased. Maybe provide a little more info. Sometimes students need to know every single data point. And in that case, what I would actually recommend is, rather than using like this alt text field, I usually would put in, alt text description for graph, something like this underneath the image. And then I would actually create, we do this in some of our classes in distance learning, we create a separate Canvas page that has the really detailed breakdown. And sometimes you format that as a table, sometimes it's a bulleted list, but basically you just have a whole separate page with a text version of the data. The thing with alt text is that it's very much more of an art than a science. There's not ever a single, like, do this one thing and it will work every time. It's very contextual and situational. On the SPS distance learning website, under our How Do I Make a Course Accessible page, we've got a really detailed breakdown on writing good alt text, and there's a whole page about like these complex images. But ultimately, that's something where you may want to like talk with a digital accessibility liaison, or maybe reach out to Accessible NU for some input, because yeah, like depending on what the question is asking, it can be really hard to figure out how to describe the image in such a way that it doesn't provide the answer to the student. So I'm then going to really quickly demonstrate another tool that is in Canvas, and this is called You Do It. And so the way that you add this, it's a learning app. So when you have a course site, you can go to your menu, the side menu here, click on Learning Apps. I'll pull this up real quick. Give it a second to load, and then You Do It is down here at the bottom. You can just click Install. It'll give you a few different options, and it'll just automatically install itself in your course. It's great. So what this does is it is a full course accessibility checker. So, there's a single page checker that's built into Canvas. You Do It is a full course. The one thing it doesn't check is like documents or anything you have attached. So it's not able to scan those, but anything else that's in your course, it can check. And as it says here, is developed by a team at the University of Central Florida, and it has been freely shared for other Canvas users. So you'll see here, you can choose, what content you want it to look at, and then what types of error, issues to look for. So we're just going to have it check everything. So we're going to click this, scan this course, then I'm going to wait. This is a pretty small course. This is a workshop that we offer for our faculty who are developing courses with us. It's only a few modules. If you've got a full 10-week course, that's full of content, it's going to have, it'll take a little longer, but it tends to work pretty quickly. Usually it takes a few minutes at most. Yep, here we go. Okay, so it gives me this big report. Only a few errors, which is great. A lot of suggestions, and then a few things it couldn't scan. So, and then it tells me kind of the specifics of, where it's finding problems. And then it breaks things down by kind of content area. No issues in the announcements because there aren't any announcements. So, if we go here, it's flagging, there's an image on this page that it thinks should have an alt attribute. Now, this is the thing where, again, automated checkers are great resources to start with, but you need to have kind of your own background knowledge on accessibility to sort of verify what the checker is telling you. So if I click view the source of this issue, it shows me this, nice stock photo of some people talking. Now, I know from having built this course page, and it also shows the HTML for it, that this is just a decorative image. This is just a stock photo to kind of make the page look prettier. So it's been marked as decorative. It doesn't need alt text. So this one, it's a suggestion. I'm going to skip it because I know that that's not actually a problem. Let's scroll down a little further. Let's see what we've got here. Okay, so this is an actual error. Should not be, the alternative text should not be the image file name. So let's click view the source of this issue again. Okay, so in this case, this is a little decorative icon. And this actually doesn't need alt text. This just needs to be marked as decorative. I'm guessing that it just got missed when it was uploaded. So let's see if we can fix it from here. So we click this You Fix It button, and then I can either type in the alt text or I'll mark the image as decorative and hit submit. And now, if I go over to this page where that image was, so here's where that icon was. If I go into edit and hopefully not break any of my colleagues' beautiful formatting, we click here, we go into image, you can see it's been marked as decorative. And I'm assuming that this just got missed because all the rest of the images on this page have been, appropriately marked as decorative. So that's kind of how You Do It works. It'll give you it'll scan your whole course. It'll give you alerts about any issues that it finds. You can fix it right from this interface, but you do need to kind of have your own knowledge about how accessibility works so that you can make your own judgment calls of if something is actually an error or not. All right, I will stop sharing my screen and pass it over to Jim.
Thanks, Christine. And as we're talking about those automated checkers as well, the one thing I'll reiterate, the big difference between those two is the accessibility checker that's in Canvas only works one page at a time, right? And it's only that page that you're in edit mode on. You Do It runs that scan on the entire course. So it's kind of which way do you want to approach this is how you want to maybe use those things.
Yeah, just to chime in, the like one at a time thing in the rich text editor is best for like when you're building a Canvas site. You Do It is really good if you are like revising a site that already exists. If you've got a fully built course site and you want to just give it a full scan, You Do It is great for that.
So what I want to talk to you about today is some tools that we have at the university that are available to everybody that can really be used for UDL purposes, by students, by faculty, staff, whoever. We've talked about, you've gone through core sessions about multiple means of representation of material. And if you are designing your course in the way that Christine talked about here, you can use some of these tools, or students can use some of these tools to have this read back out loud or to manipulate this text in different ways as opposed to just reading it. If it's a group of students that, they spend a lot of time on the computer all day and just looking at more text is going to be difficult, or somebody that's in transit and wants to use that time to listen to the text, or there's lots of different reasons why folks might use this. But the university has a site license to a tool called Read and Write, and there's different ways that you can use Read and Write to access your materials, your digital materials. The way that you can use it in Canvas is you can download a Chrome extension, and it shows up here. And when you click that, you will see this toolbar pop up within your Chrome browser. So if we wanted to, there's a lot of tools on here, but if we wanted to use some of the main tools to read Canvas, one thing that we could do is click on this hover speech button. And if I click on that, basically what that means is if I hover over any text where I want it to read, it's going to start reading that out loud and highlighting it for me as well. So I'll click on that and I'll hover right here.
Whether you're teaching in person, hybrid, or remote, there are digital tools you can use to make your course.
And then I can pause, play, or stop from there as well. And if I left that cursor there, it would just keep going. But you see, it's got that nice reading component, while also highlighting as it reads so that people can follow along that way. You can see it's grayed out everything else while I'm on that hover to speak. So I'm going to click that off to go back into some of my other options. If I wanted to take and turn this page into an MP3, I could click or I could hover over the text or highlight the text I want to use to turn into an MP3 and click on this audio maker button here. And hold on, I clicked on my audio maker and my zoom bar was in the way, but you can see now it's taken and there's an MP3 that is created and downloaded over here for that MP3 that was created here. Other things that could be helpful with this is you may have students that don't want to listen but want to read but have a hard time focusing on certain areas. There is this screen masking option within this where you can darken the rest of the screen and leave a gap here, leave a lightened gap where you can use to focus in on certain sentences or certain areas that you want to read. And you can adjust the size of that as well. So if I look over here, I can click on settings and I could change the height of that reading line, so it just gives me like one line that I'm able to uncover there. Maybe we go a little bit more, make that a little bigger, and then turn off the settings, and you can see that. Let's see if we go back into this. I'm going to turn off my settings, and I'll save it, and I'll go back into it, and now you can see that's smaller, so it's maybe just allowing for one line to be uncovered and help students focus that way. I can turn that off, and some other options that I have here that are cool include highlighting options. So a lot of students like to annotate, text and whatnot, highlight things and turn it into notes. What you can do that here by selecting your text that you want to highlight and choosing a highlighter color. There's 4 different highlighter colors you can use. The really neat part of this is that when you're done, there's this collect highlights button, which allows you to say, yep, I want all of these highlights, and I can click on it and it's going to go and it's going to pull those out and it's going to create a new document for me. In this case, it'll be a Google Doc, and it will have just those highlighters in it along with the things that we highlighted, along with a citation for where we grabbed that from. So a lot of students really like that aspect of this as well. Really helpful technology for students in the class. The other thing that can be really helpful, again, UDL wise, for various folks, for whatever reason, this course is pretty well set up. It's pretty basic, but if it was a little bit more difficult to read, if there's a lot of distractive things in it, they could hit this button, which is going to simplify the look. And it's going to take you to a new page. And what you'll see on this page in just a second is it's going to bring up that Canvas page without any of the stuff from the side. It should have limited images in it. We'll come back. It's being really slow right now. It usually is not that slow, but we will come back to that in just a second and make sure that and take a look at that as well. But that's essentially this toolbar. This can be really helpful. The way that you can get this is there's I think it's on the bottom of this page as well, but if you go to Accessible NU's site, there's a way to access Read and Write there. Essentially what you'll do is you'll go from there to Text Help's site, access a 30-day trial of it, and sign in with your Northwestern credentials, and then that becomes free for you to use due to Northwestern's site license. So here's what that page looks like simplified. You can see it's taken out the whole thing on the left side. It's got these images kind of large here, but it's simplified the text, but we can manipulate that text more here as well. So one of the things that we can do is we can change the contrast of this. If this is easier for someone to see, we can easily make that yellow on blue. We can change the font size if we wanted to, or the font itself. In this case, there's a font called Open Dyslexic that you could use that I'll switch it to here. Open Dyslexic is a font designed with folks with dyslexia in mind. It weights the bottom of letters a little bit heavier so that those letters don't float on the page, which tends to happen for folks with dyslexia. It highlights certain aspects of certain letters like D or B or G or P so that it's easier for somebody to decipher what those letters are as well. So there's different options there. We can change the size of the text really easily. We can change the spacing between the text as well really easily for folks. And then there's an option here also to simplify. I'm going to go back to our standard black on white. I'm going to take this back to our, let's see, the sans serif font. We'll make it a little bit larger. And the simplify option here, what this can do is this almost gives like a summary of what is on the page. So it can, and I'm not sure what the algorithm is that it uses, but it will start to take out pieces of this if it's too long for folks to read, and they can get kind of a snippet of what's on this page. So it's not necessarily completely recommended when you're trying to get all the information down, but it gives people an idea of what's there if they're looking for some help with what they should skim. And then there's an option too here called Discover. If we turn that on, it's going to find text, and it's still working, but it's going to find text that people might have trouble with the words that they might struggle with. I don't know why tools would be, but if you hover over that or click on it, what it should give you is an image of what that is and a definition, so you can understand some of those words a little bit better. I'm interested in what they have for Northwestern University. Well, they have our logo and where we are. So that is all stuff that students can do within Canvas with Read and Write. The other really helpful component of Read and Write is for PDFs. And the way that it's used with PDFs is through something called Orbit Note, also part of the text help suite. So we get this with our text help Read and Write access. Students would go to orbit.texthelp.com, and then they can, again, log in with their Northwestern net ID and password, and they will have access to using Orbit Note. From the faculty staff side, since we're on the Microsoft domain, this is what Orbit Note looks like for us, and we would pull anything in that we want to read, any PDF that we want to read through here. For students, since they're on the Google platform, they'd sign in through Google. They could use this as well, or if they've got a Google Drive where they're saving things, they can just go into Google Drive, right-click on a PDF, say open with Orbit Note, and it will open that up in Orbit Note for that individual. So here, I'm going to go choose a file, and I'm going to go to my desktop, and I'm going to find an example of a PDF that we use. And I'm going to open that up in Orbit Note. And if you look up top here, what you're going to see is that this toolbar is very similar to what we had over in Read and Write in Canvas. Very similar tools, very similar approach here. Here, if we want to read something, we click on our click to speak. We click where we want to read.
How not to do UDL in 2016.
And it starts to read from there.
To facilitate a faculty
Again, we can play, pause, stop, or we can jump around in that and read things further if we want to. I think I didn't mention this before, but there are ways to change the reading speed. We can change the voice. There's different languages. So if we had text in foreign languages, we could open up that language and have it read in there as well. The real helpful piece within the PDF reader, this Orbit Note piece, is these all of these annotation pieces that are in there. So just like before, we've got the highlighter options where we can go through and highlight text, pull that out into a Google Doc or a Word document here. We've also got the ability to draw on here if we wanted to. We can put a shape on if we wanted to do that. I'm not sure. I don't think we do right now. We'll get rid of that one. We can like draw circles or underlines things if we want to do that for annotation purposes. You can change line color thicknesses, all that stuff as well. We'll take that out of there. Those things aren't necessarily super helpful, but these things could very well be very helpful. We've got annotation options for adding text to our document, which you can see, I think I've done an example here before and added this remember text right in there. But if I click on T, I can click anywhere on my PDF and add a note, and it becomes just part of the text here. You can see that that's added as part of the text. If I don't want it to be part of the text, and maybe if I did, one of the things I might do is change the color of that so it stands out a little bit more. We can change that to red so it stands out a little bit more, and I remember that that's there. The other thing we can do is we can drop these push pin notes in here. So if like something's being said that's really important, I'm reading something that I think is really important for the test, I can click on this and type that note in here. You can see there's other options for changing the font size, changing the color And then when I click on this, it will, or when I click back on my screen, it's just going to be this push pin here. So whenever I have one of these push pins, that tells me that I can go click on that and it'll show me that there's a note underneath that. So some really neat opportunities for annotating for students within PDFs and for reading those PDFs out loud as well. Read and Write's a great tool. Again, we have site license to this. Anybody can use it. I'd almost recommend just pointing this out to students within your Canvas site, directing them to where they can access this and begin to use it. There's tutorials within the ANU site as well as to how to use this tool. But also, if it's something that you're interested in using, by all means, as a faculty and staff member, you have access to it as well, and it's something that you could utilize for your own needs also. And one more tool that I wanted to show you, and that's called Census Access. This is more of a service, I suppose. One of the things that we didn't touch on much in this Canvas accessibility piece is, what do we do? How do we make sure our PDFs that we're adding to our Canvas site, our readings that we're adding to our Canvas site, are accessible? And one of the biggest issues folks run into is, hey, I have this scanned PDF that's up on a site. That is not necessarily helpful at all. Students with disabilities aren't going to be able to use that. Students that use Read and Write aren't going to be able to do that. If we upload that document that's been scanned in and it looks at like an image file into Orbit Note, it's not going to read it. It's going to, in fact, I think I can show you here real quick how we might go about doing that. Let's see. I'm going to sign back into Orbit Note, and I'm going to show you what happens if we pull in an inaccessible PDF. So something that's image based, that's been scanned in. I can go here and I can say, all right, we're going to pull in this inaccessible PDF. Basically, what happens here is I'm pulling in a scanned image. The text, the tool is going to see this as an image. So if I click to speak and go click anywhere on here, it's not reading anything because it doesn't recognize that there's text in here. It sees this as an image. And so this tool is useless at this point on this PDF because it can't access any of that text. If we're going to put up scanned PDFs, one of the ways that one thing we should do first is utilize this service that we have access to called Census Access, because that will run a conversion on that PDF, make it look the same way, but give you text that can be read back out loud. So the way you use this is you click on Census Access Conversion Form, and then you get to this page where you can click how you want, what you want to do, what you want to convert or into what format. Since what I have there is a file, I'm going to use File. I'm going to go here to choose my files, and I'm going to add that file to Census Access and upload it. When I upload it, I'm going to get more options here, and it's going to allow me to do a few different things. What I want to do with this, because I know it's inaccessible, is run an accessibility conversion on it. And I can choose my format that I want it to come back in. If I want it to look the same but be able to be read, I'm going to choose PDF, tagged PDF, image over text. So it's going to keep that image. It's going to have an underlying layer of text that then those tools will be able to read and people will be able to access that. From there, I would go and plug in my Northwestern email address, hit submit, and it will send me back the converted file in about 10 minutes. And you can pop that file into your Canvas page and be in good shape. The other options here that could be helpful, we've talked about multiple means of representation, right? One of the things that you could do is you could take any document and turn it into an MP3 as well. So you could post an MP3 of that document to your site, or you can point students to this. Students have access to, if they want to take your documents or if they want to copy your text out of Canvas, they could turn those into MP3s and read those as well, and listen to those. And again, that takes about 10 minutes and you get that MP3 sent directly to you. We don't have any students that use Braille, but if we need to convert something to Braille, we could do that here as well. That's an option there because you never know when you may have a student that needs Braille. And if we need to start converting text that way into Braille ready formats, this would be a great tool for that as well. So those are just a couple tools that we have access to that can make the experience better for students when you make things accessible. It's been a pleasure sharing this stuff with you, and hopefully You'll be able to go forth and make your Canvas sites a little more accessible, a little more usable. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we'll let you go.